The summer of 1989 was unusually hot in rural Texas. The sun burned the edges of the endless fields surrounding the old family farm, casting long shadows across the dusty paths that twisted between the barns and silos. Jake, Emily, and Sam, cousins close in age and inseparable since childhood, arrived that Friday evening, their laughter echoing across the property as they ran toward the farmhouse. To an outsider, it seemed like any ordinary weekend, a small escape from the bustle of town life, filled with barbecues, late-night stories, and the familiar creak of the old farmhouse floors. But there was a certain heaviness in the air that no one could explain. The first hint of unease came from the farm's surroundings. The neighbors, who were used to seeing the children run freely among the fields, noticed trucks circling the area at odd hours. They weren't the usual farm vehicles. They were large, dark, and silent, sometimes parked just beyond the tree line. Locals exchanged uneasy glances but shrugged it off. After all, rural Texas had its share of curious drivers and occasional trespassers. Still, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She kept glancing over her shoulder while helping Jake feed the chickens. Inside the farmhouse, everything seemed ordinary, almost comforting. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, and Sam spent hours tinkering in the barn with his toy trucks, imagining adventures that stretched across the horizon. The cousins joked and teased each other, oblivious to the tension building outside. Yet, even in the midst of their laughter, subtle things felt off: doors that creaked too loudly, windows that rattled even though the wind had died down, and the faint sound of footsteps in places where no one should have been. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and crimson, a strange stillness fell over the property. The usual chorus of cicadas and crickets seemed muted, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Jake wandered toward the edge of the fields, trying to catch a glimpse of the distant horizon, and for the first time, he noticed shadows moving unnaturally between the trees. They weren't cast by the setting sun. Something, or someone, was there, and it was silent, patient, waiting. By nightfall, the cousins gathered around the old porch, the boards creaking under their restless movements. The faint glow of lanterns illuminated their faces, showing excitement, curiosity, and just a hint of unease. They laughed and shared stories, but every so often, all three would pause, listening. A distant howl, a rustle, a fleeting glimpse of movement would cause them to glance toward the darkened fields, hearts thudding in unison. No one could have guessed that this seemingly ordinary weekend, filled with warmth and family bonds, was about to become the setting for one of the most haunting disappearances Texas would ever know. Sunday morning arrived quietly, the kind of calm that feels almost too heavy. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting a golden haze across the farm, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. But when the cousins' parents went to wake them, the farmhouse was eerily silent. The rooms were empty. The beds were made perfectly, blankets tucked neatly as if no one had ever slept in them. Breakfast sat untouched on the table, plates still stacked with yesterday's food, forks resting where the cousins had left them. The dog wandered aimlessly through the rooms, whimpering softly, looking for faces that were never coming back. At first, the parents thought the children might have wandered outside into the fields, playing hide-and-seek as they sometimes did. But the morning air was calm, and no laughter, no movement, no footprints led away from the farmhouse. The back door was locked, the windows were shut, and the gate to the property showed no signs of tampering. It was as if Jake, Emily, and Sam had simply evaporated into thin air. Fear started to creep in, a tight, cold feeling in the chest, as the parents called out their names again and again, their voices trembling and echoing across the empty farm. Neighbors were the first to respond, drawn by the frantic cries and the dog's incessant barking. They combed the fields, the woods lining the property, even the shallow creek that cut through the back of the farm. Their flashlights cut through the morning fog, illuminating nothing but long grasses swaying in the breeze. The trucks the neighbors had seen the night before had disappeared. No signs, no evidence, no hint of where the children had gone. It was as if the farm itself had swallowed them whole, leaving nothing behind but silence and growing dread. Authorities were called in, and soon the property was crawling with search teams, patrol cars, and helicopters hovering overhead. Canines sniffed every corner, every path, and every tree line, but the dogs seemed confused, pulling back as if the scent itself had vanished. Questions swirled. Had someone taken them? Had they wandered off and fallen victim to the land's hidden dangers? Or had something far more sinister occurred, something no one could have imagined? Each passing hour without a clue tightened the grip of terror on the parents, the neighbors, and the small Texas town that had known these children all their lives. By midday, a sense of dread had settled over the farm, a feeling that would linger for decades. Families gathered, whispers and rumors spread, and every rustle of wind through the cornfields sounded like a warning. The search extended beyond the farm into the surrounding woods, rivers, and abandoned barns, but every lead went cold. People started talking in hushed tones about dark possibilities. Strangers in the night, old grudges, secrets buried in the farm's long history. No one could explain how 3 children could vanish without a trace, leaving behind only the faint echoes of their laughter and the heavy, unshakable weight of mystery. The moment the children were reported missing, the small Texas town erupted into frantic activity. Friends, neighbors, and local volunteers poured onto the farm, combing every inch of the property with flashlights, shovels, and a determination born of love and desperation. Families called in every favor they could, rallying police officers and search and rescue teams from neighboring counties. The fields were trampled by hundreds of boots, the woods echoing with shouted names. Jake, Emily, Sam. Yet every call returned only silence. Even the old barn, with its hidden corners and dusty haylofts, revealed nothing but shadows and echoes. Dogs were brought in to track the cousins' scents, their noses close to the ground, ears twitching at the faintest hints of a trail. But the dogs faltered, sniffing in confusion and then retreating, as if the scent itself had vanished into thin air. Helicopters circled above, their spotlights piercing the fog that had settled low in the fields. But even from the air, there was no sign of the children. Volunteers combed nearby creeks, abandoned wells, and wooded ravines, but the land offered nothing. It was as if the cousins had walked out of existence. Weeks turned into months, and still, no trace emerged. Authorities expanded the search radius, enlisting cadaver dogs, tracking experts, and even psychics who claimed they could see the missing children. Letters arrived at the local police station, unsigned and cryptic, claiming to hold clues about the cousins' fate, but each was dismissed as a cruel prank. Yet every detail of the case seemed to deepen the mystery. There were no ransom notes, no witnesses, no sightings that could be verified. The family's anguish grew unbearable, and the town began whispering about a darkness that had settled over the farm, something that shouldn't be spoken of aloud. The media caught wind of the case, and reporters descended on the sleepy town, cameras rolling, microphones thrust forward, asking questions no one had answers for. Every interview, every tip, every so-called lead ended in frustration. Even experts in missing persons cases were baffled. The land was too vast, the trail too cold, and the circumstances too bizarre. The more people searched, the deeper the sense of futility grew. Yet every night, the parents sat awake by the phone, praying for a call that would never come. Over time, the case became legendary in the region. Children who had grown up hearing about Jake, Emily, and Sam would dare each other to visit the empty farmhouse at night, feeling a chill even in the warm Texas summer. Farmers passing by reported strange noises, soft laughter carried on the wind, or the creak of the farmhouse door swinging open when no one was there. And despite every search, every investigation, and every desperate effort, one fact remained painfully clear. No one knew where the cousins had gone, and the land itself seemed to be holding its secrets close, refusing to give them up. Even after months of exhaustive searches, a few odd details began to surface, clues that made no sense but refused to be ignored. One neighbor claimed to have seen the children just days after their disappearance. According to him, Jake, Emily, and Sam had been near the old silo, playing as if nothing had happened. But when investigators checked the area, there were no footprints, no signs of movement, and no explanation for how someone could see them without anyone else noticing. It was as if the children had existed in a shadow world, visible only to certain eyes, teasing the imagination with the impossible. Then there was the water tank near the back of the property. Locals had long known it was old and rusty, a relic of the farm's earlier days. But several people mentioned an unusual smell around it in the days following the disappearance, a metallic, almost chemical odor that hung in the summer air. At the time, authorities dismissed it as decay or stagnant water. Nobody thought to investigate it further. Yet, in hindsight, it would later prove to be one of the most critical pieces of the puzzle, a silent witness to a secret buried deep beneath the farm's soil. Adding to the mystery were the letters that started arriving at the family's doorstep and at the police station. They were unsigned and often cryptic, containing phrases like, "They never left," or "The farm keeps its own." Sometimes the letters were typed, other times scrawled in messy handwriting, but they all hinted at knowledge no one should have had. Some people suggested they were hoaxes, desperate attempts to gain attention. But for the family, They were terrifying reminders that someone, maybe more than one person, was watching, waiting, and perhaps enjoying the fear that had gripped them for months. Small items also began to appear in strange places around the farm. A toy truck that Jake had been playing with, a scarf Emily was known to wear, even a journal belonging to Sam. None of it was marked by decay, as if it had been kept in a controlled environment. But how it ended up scattered across the property without any evidence of the children themselves remained impossible to explain. Each item raised more questions than answers, creating a maze of riddles for authorities to navigate, with no solution in sight. And yet, despite these clues, the official investigation hit a wall. Witness accounts contradicted each other, evidence seemed to vanish as quickly as it appeared, and any patterns were impossible to discern. It was as if the farm itself was alive, playing tricks on those who dared to look too closely. The more people examined the clues, the more confusion grew, and the story of the vanished cousins became not just a tragedy, but a riddle that no one, not even the most experienced investigators, could solve. Decades passed, and the story of Jake, Emily, and Sam slowly slipped from national headlines, but it never left the hearts of their families. The small Texas town carried the weight of the mystery like a shadow over its fields, a cautionary tale whispered to every child who grew up near the old farmhouse. Neighbors moved on, the farm changed hands, and yet the unanswered questions lingered. Each new owner reported the same feeling of unease, the sense that the land itself was watching, waiting, and hiding something too terrible to uncover. For the cousins' parents, life was a series of anniversaries marked by sorrow. Every birthday, every holiday, every small milestone passed with an empty chair at the table. Friends tried to comfort them, but words were meaningless against a disappearance that defied explanation. As the years rolled on, hope became a fragile thread, sometimes strong enough to drive them to visit the farm and search once more, sometimes fraying to the point of despair. The silence of 35 years was deafening, a reminder that the children had vanished without a trace. Rumors and legends grew with time. Locals claimed that at night, the farmhouse lights flickered even when the house was abandoned. Some said the old water tank made strange noises during storms, as if something inside was shifting or calling out. Teenagers dared each other to sneak onto the property, swearing they heard giggles or footsteps echoing across the fields. It was a story told in whispers at town gatherings, a story that refused to die, as though the very earth held a memory that refused to fade, guarding its secrets behind layers of rust and dirt. Then, in the summer of 2024, a new owner decided to renovate the property, hoping to restore it to its former glory. What they found was something the town had never anticipated. While clearing the area behind the barn, a strange glint caught the eye of a worker. Buried beneath decades of soil and overgrown brush, a large water tank, long forgotten and nearly hidden, sat partially exposed. The metal was corroded, but it was intact, its size hinting at the capacity to hide something or someone. The discovery immediately drew attention, and authorities were called back to a farm that hadn't seen official investigation in decades. For the first time in 35 years, the story of the vanished cousins surged back into the spotlight. News crews flocked to the area, and the town buzzed with anticipation, speculation, and fear. What had been decades of silence was about to be shattered, and the questions that had haunted the families and community for over 3 decades were suddenly alive again. Every eye on the property now sought answers that had eluded generations, and the long, agonizing wait for the truth was about to take a turn no one could have imagined. When authorities arrived at the farm after the new owner's call, a sense of unease hung over the scene like a thick fog. Investigators carefully approached the partially buried tank, its rusted surface pitted from decades underground. The air smelled faintly metallic, the same strange odor some locals had remembered decades earlier but had never reported. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and the once quiet farm suddenly felt alive with anticipation, as if it had been waiting all these years for this very moment. With meticulous care, the team began excavating around the tank. Each shovel of dirt revealed layers of history, rusted nails, broken toys, and fragments of old farm tools long forgotten. The neighbors watched from a distance, holding their breath, some clutching their children tightly, haunted by memories of the cousins' disappearance. The tank itself seemed impossibly intact despite decades underground, a metal coffin buried in plain sight, silently holding secrets that no one had dared to uncover. Finally, investigators pried open the heavy lid, and what they found inside sent shockwaves through everyone present. Personal items belonging to the cousins, clothes, toys, and even Sam's worn journal, lay carefully preserved as if someone had placed them there with intention. Nothing had decayed, nothing had been disturbed. But there were no bodies. The tank contained everything that tied the cousins to the farm, yet the most important piece of the puzzle, the children themselves, was missing. It was a discovery that made no logical sense, a haunting testament to a mystery that had spanned decades. Experts combed through the items carefully, cataloging every piece and looking for clues that might explain what had happened. Jake's favorite toy truck was perfectly clean, Emily's scarf looked almost new, and Sam's journal contained half-finished notes, some referencing the farm and others filled with cryptic doodles. Each item raised new questions. Who placed them in the tank? Why were they preserved so carefully? And most importantly, if the cousins had never left the property, where had they gone? The farm, which had once seemed like a place of comfort and laughter, now felt ominous and unwelcoming, holding its secrets behind rusted steel walls. The discovery ignited a frenzy of speculation. Investigators, journalists, and townspeople all struggled to make sense of the evidence. Could the children have been hidden elsewhere on the property? Was there someone still connected to the farm who knew what happened? The items in the tank suggested intent, but the absence of the cousins themselves added a layer of terror to the mystery. For 35 years, the farm had been silent. Now, it had spoken, but only in riddles, leaving everyone questioning whether they would ever truly understand the fate of Jake, Emily, and Sam. As investigators sifted through the contents of the water tank, a chilling realization began to take shape. The items were not randomly placed. Each belonged to one of the cousins, arranged in a way that suggested careful thought. Jake's baseball glove lay next to Emily's favorite doll, while Sam's journal rested atop a folded blanket. The precision of the arrangement was unsettling. Whoever had put these things in the tank had intimate knowledge of the children's lives, habits, and personalities. Someone who knew them too well. Someone who had been closer than anyone had imagined. Forensic experts examined the tank for fingerprints, DNA, or any trace of human presence beyond the items themselves, but results were inconclusive. It was as if the cousins had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the echo of their existence. Theories began to circulate immediately. Could this have been the work of a stranger who had been hiding on the property all along? Or had the family unknowingly been harboring a secret for decades, one that only now was manifesting in the most horrifying way? The answers seemed just out of reach, taunting those desperate for closure. Local historians and longtime residents dug through town records, uncovering a series of strange events connected to the farm over the past century. Previous owners had reported mysterious lights in the fields, unexplained noises at night, and livestock that disappeared without explanation. Some recalled stories of a hidden bunker or underground storage on the property, but no one had ever located it. Could the farm itself, with its labyrinth of forgotten structures and secret spaces, have been part of the cousins' disappearance all along? Every revelation deepened the mystery, painting a picture of a place more sinister than anyone had imagined. The family, watching the investigation unfold, was torn between hope and terror. Each new clue hinted that the cousins were not lost to the world entirely. They had been somewhere, under someone's control, perhaps aware of their surroundings yet trapped beyond rescue. And yet, as the tank was excavated and the items catalogued, the overwhelming truth became unavoidable. The cousins' disappearance was not random, not accidental. Someone had orchestrated it with careful intent, leaving behind only fragments of the children's lives as both a message and a tormenting puzzle. Whispers spread through the town like wildfire. Some said the property was cursed, that the farm had absorbed the children into its shadowy depths. Others believed that someone still knew the truth, watching silently as decades passed, waiting for the right moment for the secret to be unearthed. Theories ranged from the plausible to the supernatural, but all agreed on one terrifying certainty. The cousins had never truly left the property, and the full story of what happened, and who was responsible, remained locked away, buried beneath the farm's soil and shrouded in darkness. As the investigation continues, the truth about what happened to Jake, Emily, and Sam remains elusive. The water tank revealed fragments of their lives, but not the children themselves. Some say the farm still holds its secrets, waiting silently beneath the soil, watching anyone who dares to step onto the property. Others whisper that the cousins' spirits linger, trapped between worlds, their story unfinished. One thing is certain, the farm remembers. Every rusted tool, every overgrown path, every creaking floorboard carries a memory of that fateful summer in 1989. And though decades have passed, the questions remain. Who took them? Why? And is the person responsible still out there, knowing the secret that the world has yet to uncover? Perhaps some mysteries are meant to stay buried, their answers hidden just out of reach. But for those who dare to look closely, the farm whispers its warning. We were never gone, and someone still knows the truth.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.